My name is Nicole, and I'm 32 years old. I never thought I'd be sitting here telling you this story, but sometimes life forces you to confront truths you've been avoiding for years. 3 months ago, I walked into my mother-in-law's house to find my children's belongings in trash bags on the curb. Their toys, clothes, books, everything they'd left there during their weekend stays, gone. Discarded like they meant nothing. But this isn't just about thrown away toys. This is about a family that taught me the difference between being related to someone and actually being loved by them. I'm sharing this because maybe you've felt invisible in your own family too. Maybe you've watched someone else get the love and respect you desperately wanted. If that's you, keep watching. This story might change how you see your own worth. The morning everything changed, I was rushing to pick up my kids from Mark's mother's house. My husband Mark was working late again. His construction job kept him busy, but lately it felt like he was avoiding home altogether. I pulled into the familiar driveway, expecting to see Emma and Jake playing in the backyard. Instead, I saw black garbage bags lined up like soldiers waiting for battle. My heart stopped. I recognized Emma's purple backpack sticking out of one bag, Jake's favorite stuffed elephant peeking from another. "What is this?" I called out, my voice cracking. Margaret, my mother-in-law, appeared on the porch. Her silver hair was perfectly styled as always. Her expression was cold, distant, like I was a stranger interrupting her afternoon. "Oh, Nicole, I didn't expect you so early. Why are my children's things in garbage bags?" She smoothed her floral dress and sighed. "Well, Brandon needs the space. He's moving back home temporarily. You understand." Brandon, her precious youngest son, the golden child who could do no wrong in her eyes. At 28, he was moving back home again after another failed business venture. "So you threw out Emma and Jake's belongings? Their, clothes? Their toys they've had here for 2 years? They're just things, Nicole. Children are adaptable. Just things." I felt something break inside me. Those weren't just things to my kids. That room was their safe space, their connection to their father's family. If you are watching this right now, drop a comment letting me know where you are viewing from. Before I tell you about this life-changing decision, hit like and subscribe to hear more real stories about family loyalty and betrayal that might just change how you see your own relationships. I stood there staring at those garbage bags, and suddenly everything made sense. Every snide comment. Every time she forgot Emma's birthday, but remembered Brandon's friends' birthdays. Every time she served Jake the smallest portion at family dinners. We weren't her grandchildren. We were inconveniences. "Where are Emma and Jake?" I managed to ask. "Inside watching television. Brandon brought them some new games." Of course he did. Brandon, who hadn't held a steady job in 5 years. Brandon, who lived off his mother's generosity while criticizing everyone else's choices. Brandon, who was about to take over the room where my children felt they belonged. I walked inside, my legs feeling like lead. Emma, my 7-year-old, looked up with confused eyes. "Mommy, Grandma Margaret said we can't sleep here anymore. She said Uncle Brandon needs our room for his important work." Important work. I almost laughed, but the pain was too sharp. Jake, my 5-year-old, was clutching his stuffed elephant, the one I'd rescued from the garbage bag. "Did we do something wrong, Mommy?" That's when I knew. Standing in that living room, watching my children's confusion, I realized I had to make a choice. I could keep pretending this family treated us with respect, or I could finally admit the truth. We were never going to be enough for them. But here's what Margaret didn't know. Here's what none of them knew. 2 weeks earlier, I'd gotten the promotion I'd been working toward for 3 years. senior marketing manager, a 40% salary increase, and I'd already been looking at houses. This moment, devastating as it was, became the catalyst for everything that followed. Sometimes the worst day of your life becomes the first day of your new life. Are you ready to hear how standing up for my children changed everything? Because what happened next surprised everyone, including me. Let me take you back to the beginning. When Mark and I met 7 years ago, I thought I was joining a close-knit family. Margaret seemed welcoming at first. She cooked elaborate Sunday dinners and insisted we join every holiday celebration. But families, I learned, can be like beautiful paintings with cracks underneath the surface. Mark is the middle child of 3 boys. There's David, the oldest, who moved to California and rarely visits. Then Mark. And finally, Brandon, the baby, who never grew up. From day one, the dynamics were clear. David was the successful one who got away. Mark was the reliable one who stayed close, and Brandon was the precious one who could do no wrong. Margaret treated Brandon like he was made of gold, while everyone else was pewter. When Brandon dropped out of college, it was because he was too creative for traditional education. When Mark missed 1 semester due to financial struggles, it was because he wasn't applying himself. The favoritism was so obvious it was almost comical. Almost. I remember our first Christmas together. Margaret had wrapped dozens of presents for Brandon. Expensive electronics, designer clothes, gift cards to fancy restaurants. Mark got a sweater and a lecture about saving money. I got a candle. A single candle from the clearance bin at the grocery store. The price tag was still on it. But I told myself it didn't matter. I was marrying Mark, not his family. When Emma was born, I hoped things would change. Surely a grandmother's love would soften Margaret's edges. The day we brought Emma home from the hospital, Margaret came to visit. She held our daughter for exactly 5 minutes before handing her back. She looks just like you, Nicole. Poor thing. I should have known then. But love makes you optimistic about impossible things. 2 years later, when Jake arrived, Margaret's reaction was even more telling. She forgot to visit the hospital altogether. She was too busy helping Brandon move apartments again. Mark tried to defend his mother. She's just set in her ways. Nicole, she doesn't know how to show affection. But I watched her with Brandon's friends' children. I saw her light up around neighbor kids. She knew how to show affection. She just chose not to show it to mine. The pattern continued for years. Christmas mornings where Emma and Jake would watch Brandon open gift after gift, while they each got 1 small toy. Birthday parties where Margaret would forget to bring cake, but remember to criticize my parenting choices. You're too soft on them, Nicole. Children need structure. This from a woman who still did Brandon's laundry and paid his rent. Mark worked constantly to prove himself worthy of his mother's approval. He took on extra shifts, helped with home repairs, never missed a family dinner. But Margaret's praise was always reserved for Brandon's smallest accomplishments. The breaking point had been building for months. Brandon had moved out of his apartment because he couldn't make rent again. Margaret immediately offered him the guest room where Emma and Jake stayed during their weekend visits. It's just temporary, Mark assured me. Just until Brandon gets back on his feet. Brandon had been getting back on his feet for a decade. Have you ever felt like you're fighting for scraps of love in your own family? Comment below if you've experienced this kind of favoritism. It's more common than you might think, and you're not alone. But here's what I didn't tell Margaret that day I found those garbage bags. The promotion I'd received wasn't just any promotion. It came with relocation options. I could transfer to our company's Denver office, Austin office, or stay local with a significant raise. For weeks, I'd been researching neighborhoods, school districts, housing markets. Not because I was planning to leave, but because I wanted options. I wanted to know we could build a life independent of Mark's family if necessary. That day, staring at my children's belongings treated like trash, I realized necessity had arrived. Margaret thought she was clearing space for her golden child. What she was actually doing was clearing the path for my family's independence. But first, I had to navigate the immediate crisis. My children were confused and hurt. Mark was caught between loyalty to his mother and protecting his family, and I was about to make decisions that would change all our lives forever. Sometimes you don't choose your breaking point. Sometimes your breaking point chooses you. That evening, after we got home, I sat Emma and Jake down for the hardest conversation I'd had with them yet. You know how sometimes families make changes? I began carefully. Emma, always perceptive, nodded. Like when Uncle Brandon needed our room? Exactly. Well, Mommy got some really good news at work. I got promoted, which means I did such a good job that they want me to have an even more important job. Jake bounced excitedly. Does that mean more money for ice cream? Despite everything, I smiled. Maybe, but it also means we have some choices to make as a family. I explained in kid-friendly terms that we might be moving to a new house. A house that would be completely ours, where they'd have their own rooms that no one could take away. Emma was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked, "Would we still see Daddy?" That's when Mark walked in. He'd heard the last part of our conversation. "What's this about moving?" His voice was tight with concern. After I tucked the kids into bed, Mark and I had our own difficult conversation. I told him about the promotion, the options, the fact that I'd been researching possibilities for weeks. "You've been planning this behind my back?" He looked betrayed. "I've been preparing. For our future, Mark, there's a difference. My family is here, Nicole. My job, my whole life. Your family threw our children's belongings in the trash today." That hit him hard. I watched his face crumble as the reality sank in. Mom was just making space for Brandon. It wasn't personal. Everything about how your mother treats our children is personal, Mark. We talked until 3 a.m. Mark was torn between his ingrained loyalty to his family and his growing understanding of how toxic the situation had become. Meanwhile, I started making quiet preparations. I researched schools in Austin, where the company's fastest-growing office was located. I looked at houses online, calculated cost of living differences, explored job opportunities for Mark in construction. But I also did something else, something I hadn't planned. I started documenting everything, every dismissive comment from Margaret. Every time she forgot Emma's favorite foods but remembered Brandon's friends' birthdays. Every family gathering where my children were treated like afterthoughts. Not for legal reasons, but for clarity. Sometimes you need to see patterns written down to understand how deep they run. The next weekend, Margaret called to invite us to Sunday dinner. Like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't traumatized my children 3 days earlier. "Tell her. We're busy," I told Mark. "Nicole, she's trying to make amends." "Is she? Did she apologize? Did she ask how the kids are feeling? Or did she just assume we'd show up like always?" Mark couldn't answer because we both knew the truth. That Sunday, instead of going to Margaret's house, I took Emma and Jake to look at a model home in a new development across town. Not because we were buying there, but because I wanted them to see what just ours could look like. "Could I really paint my room purple?" Emma asked, running her hand along the wall of the model bedroom. "If we lived in our own house, you could paint your room any color you wanted." Jake was fascinated by the backyard. "And no one could take away my toys?" "No one could take away anything that belongs to you. If you've ever had to choose between family loyalty and protecting your children, you know how torn I felt. Drop a comment about how you handled similar situations. Your experiences might help other viewers facing tough family decisions. That evening, Mark was unusually quiet. Finally, he said, "I drove by Margaret's today. Brandon's car was in the driveway, along with 3 other cars I didn't recognize." His friends? Looked like it. They were grilling in the backyard, music playing loud. I could hear them from the street. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Margaret had kicked out her grandchildren to make room for her adult son's party pad. "I think," Mark said slowly, "we need to seriously consider your promotion options." That was the first crack in his resolve. The first sign that maybe, just maybe, we could build something better together. But Margaret wasn't done fighting for control. Not by a long shot. What happened next would test every boundary we'd ever tried to set. The confrontation happened 2 weeks later, and it wasn't planned. I was at Target with Emma and Jake, buying supplies for Emma's upcoming school project. As we turned into the craft aisle, there was Margaret, with Brandon, and a cart full of expensive art supplies. "Oh, Nicole!" Margaret's voice was artificially sweet. What a surprise. Brandon barely looked up from his phone. At 28, he still carried himself like a teenager who'd rather be anywhere else. "Hi, Margaret." I kept my voice neutral. Emma tugged on my hand. "Mommy, why is Grandma Margaret buying so many art things?" "Brandon is starting an art business," Margaret announced proudly. "He's incredibly talented. We're investing in proper supplies." I looked at the cart. Professional-grade paints, canvases, brushes that cost more than most people spend on groceries. Hundreds of dollars worth of supplies. "That's nice," I said carefully. Then Margaret did something that still makes my blood boil. She looked down at Emma and said, "Maybe someday you'll be artistic like Uncle Brandon, though talent usually runs in families." The implication was clear. Emma, who spent hours drawing and painting at home, wasn't naturally talented because she was my daughter. That's when something snapped. "Actually, Margaret, Emma is incredibly artistic. She won 2nd place in her school's art contest last month. But you wouldn't know that because you've never asked about her accomplishments." Margaret's face flushed. "I didn't know about any contest." "Because you don't pay attention to your grandchildren unless it's convenient for you." Brandon finally looked up from his phone. "Whoa, Mom, what's going on?" "Your mother threw Emma and Jake's belongings in garbage bags so you could have their room. Their toys, their clothes, everything that made them feel welcome in your family home." "It was just stuff," Margaret said defensively. "Children don't need so many possessions." "But apparently grown men do?" I gestured to the overflowing cart. Other shoppers were starting to stare. Emma pressed closer to my side, sensing the tension. "How dare you speak to me like this?" Margaret hissed. "After everything I've done for you and Mark." "What have you done for us, Margaret? Really?" "Because from where I stand, you've spent 7 years making it clear that my children aren't good enough for your love." Brandon shifted uncomfortably. "Look, I didn't know about the kids' stuff. I just needed a place to crash." "You're 28 years old, Brandon. You've been crashing somewhere for a decade while your mother enables your refusal to grow." "That's enough!" Margaret's voice rose sharply. "You have no right to criticize my parenting or my son." "You're absolutely right. Just like you have no right to criticize mine." I knelt down to Emma's level. "Sweetheart, take Jake to look at the stickers 2 aisles over. Mommy needs to finish talking to Grandma Margaret." After they left, I stood up and faced Margaret directly. "Here's what's going to happen. Mark and I are moving to Austin. I got a promotion, we're buying our own house, and we're creating a life where my children are valued." Margaret's eyes widened. You can't take my grandchildren away from me. I'm not taking them anywhere. You push them away yourself. Mark will never agree to this. This family means everything to him. Mark already agreed, because he finally sees what I've been seeing for years. You don't treat Emma and Jake like family. You treat them like inconveniences you tolerate for Mark's sake. Brandon looked genuinely shocked. Mom, is that true? About the garbage bags? For a moment, Margaret seemed to realize the gravity of what she'd done. But instead of apologizing, she doubled down. Those children are spoiled. Nicole coddles them. They needed to learn that they can't have everything handed to them. Like, you hand everything to Brandon? The silence that followed was deafening, hit like if you've ever had to stand up to a family member who was treating your children unfairly. These moments require incredible courage, but sometimes they're necessary for our children's well-being. Finally, Brandon spoke up. Mom, maybe. Maybe I should find my own place. I didn't realize the kids were staying in that room. Margaret whirled on him. Don't you dare take her side, Brandon. You need that room for your art studio. I need to grow up, he said quietly. And maybe you need to figure out how to love all your grandchildren equally. That was the moment everything shifted. Even Brandon, Margaret's golden child, could see the toxicity of the situation. Margaret looked between us, realizing she was losing control of the narrative she'd created. Fine, she said icily. Take them to Texas. But don't come crying to me when your marriage falls apart because you're too selfish to compromise. I gathered my children and left, knowing I'd never have to compromise my children's worth again. Moving to Austin changed everything, but not in the ways I expected. The first month was hard. Emma cried almost every night, missing her father. Mark struggled to find work in a new city. Jake asked repeatedly when we were going home. But slowly, something beautiful began to emerge from the chaos. Mark found a job with a construction company that specialized in custom homes. The pay was better than what he'd made back home, and his new boss appreciated his craftsmanship. For the first time in years, Mark came home from work energized instead of defeated. Emma thrived in her new school. Her teacher immediately recognized her artistic talent and enrolled her in an advanced art program. She made friends quickly, children who invited her to birthday parties and sleepovers. Jake discovered a love for soccer in our neighborhood league. He scored his first goal on a sunny Saturday morning, and Mark cried watching from the sidelines. I forgot what it felt like to be proud without apologizing for it, he told me that night. We bought a 4-bedroom house with a big backyard and space for everyone. Emma painted her room purple, just like she'd dreamed. Jake chose blue with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. But the most significant change was in Mark himself. 3 months after we moved, Margaret called. She wanted to visit for Emma's 8th birthday. She can come, I told Mark, but she stays in a hotel and she follows our rules in our house. Margaret arrived with expensive gifts, as always, but she also brought something unexpected: humility. I've been thinking about what you said in the store, she told me privately. Maybe I haven't been fair to Emma and Jake. It was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever received from her. The visit went better than expected, but it also confirmed something important. We were happier without the constant stress of trying to earn love that should have been freely given. 6 months after we moved, Brandon surprised us all. He drove to Austin to visit, without his mother. I wanted to see the kids, he said, and to apologize. He'd been attending therapy, working on understanding his role in the family dynamics. He'd also gotten a job at an art supply store and was slowly building his independence. Mom is struggling, he admitted. The house feels empty without you guys. She talks about Emma and Jake constantly. She's welcome to visit them, Mark said. but she needs to accept that this is our home now. Brandon nodded. I think she's starting to understand that. Have you ever made a major life change that seemed scary, but turned out to be exactly what your family needed? Share your story in the comments. Sometimes the biggest risks lead to the greatest rewards. 1 year later, we hosted our first Thanksgiving in our new home. Margaret came, along with David and his family who flew in from California. Brandon brought his girlfriend, a lovely woman who worked as a teacher and treated my children with genuine warmth. As I watched Emma show her California cousins her art room and Jake teaching everyone his soccer tricks in the backyard, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. Margaret was different too. She asked Emma about school, listened to Jake's stories, and complimented my cooking without any backhanded remarks. You were right to move, she told me quietly as we cleaned dishes together. I can see how happy the children are. They needed to know they were valued, Margaret. All children do. I'm learning that, she said. Better late than never. The conversation wasn't perfect, but it was honest. We were both trying to build something healthier. Mark pulled me aside that evening. Thank you, he said simply. For what? For fighting for our family when I was too scared to. For seeing what I couldn't see. For giving our children the life they deserve. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I stood in our backyard looking at the stars Jake loved so much. Sometimes protecting your children means making choices that feel impossible. Sometimes love means setting boundaries that others will call selfish. But watching Emma and Jake grow into confident, happy children who know their worth isn't negotiable, I knew we'd made the right choice. The promotion that started this whole journey led to another promotion 6 months later. We're building the life we always deserved, surrounded by people who value us for who we are. 2 years have passed since that devastating day when I found my children's belongings in garbage bags. As I'm recording this, Emma is 9 years old and just won first place in Austin's citywide youth art competition. Her painting hangs in our living room, a beautiful landscape with the title, Home is Where You're Valued. Jake is 7 now, and he's team captain of his soccer team. He's confident, outgoing, and secure in the knowledge that his room is his sanctuary that no one can take away. Mark has been promoted to project supervisor at his construction company. He's building custom homes for families, creating spaces where children can grow up feeling safe and valued. The irony isn't lost on us. But the most important change is in our family dynamic. We make decisions together now. We prioritize our children's emotional well-being above keeping peace with extended family. Margaret visits 4 times a year. She stays in a hotel, follows our house rules, and has learned to show genuine interest in Emma and Jake's lives. The relationship isn't perfect, but it's honest. Brandon moved to Denver and is engaged to his teacher girlfriend. He video calls the kids regularly and sends thoughtful gifts for birthdays and holidays. He's become the uncle they always needed. David visits more often now, too. His own children love playing with Emma and Jake, and we've built the extended family connections that were missing before. If you're watching this and feeling trapped in a toxic family dynamic, I want you to know something important. You have more power than you think. You don't have to accept treatment that diminishes your worth or your children's worth. You don't have to stay in situations that require you to constantly prove your value to people who should love you unconditionally. Let me ask you this. Have you ever felt like you're fighting for crumbs of love in your own family? Have you watched your children be treated as less important than other family members? Comment below and share your experience. Sometimes knowing we're not alone gives us the courage to make necessary changes. The decision to move wasn't easy. We left behind everything familiar. Mark had to find new work. The kids had to adjust to new schools. I had to prove myself in a new office. But here's what I learned. Familiar isn't always good. Sometimes familiar is just comfortable dysfunction. Our new life isn't perfect. We still face challenges. Emma sometimes misses her old friends. Jake occasionally asks why we can't see his grandma more often. Mark still struggles with guilt about setting boundaries with his family. But our challenges now come from growing and building something healthy, not from constantly defending our right to be treated with respect. If you're considering a major change to protect your family's well-being, here's my advice. Trust your instincts. If you feel like you're constantly walking on eggshells, constantly making excuses for other people's behavior, constantly explaining to your children why they're not being treated fairly, those feelings are telling you something important. You deserve to be valued. Your children deserve to be valued. Not as projects to fix or burdens to tolerate, but as human beings worthy of love and respect. Click like if this story resonated with you. Subscribe for more real stories about family, boundaries, and finding the courage to prioritize your own well-being. I want to hear from you. In the comments, tell me, what's the biggest change you've made to protect your family's happiness? What advice would you give to someone facing a similar situation? And if you're currently struggling with toxic family dynamics, know this: you're not responsible for fixing people who don't want to be fixed. You're only responsible for creating a safe, loving environment for yourself and your children. Sometimes the people we're related to aren't the people who truly love us. And that's okay. We can build families of choice, communities of support, and lives filled with people who see our worth without us having to prove it. Emma asked me recently if I missed our old life. I told her the truth. I miss the hope I had that things would get better. But I don't miss the constant hurt. Our new life is built on a foundation of mutual respect and genuine love. That's worth more than any family tradition or obligation. Thank you for listening to my story. Remember, you're braver than you believe, and stronger than you know. Sometimes protecting the people you love means making choices that others won't understand. Make them anyway. Your worth isn't negotiable. Neither is your children's. Make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more stories about finding strength in difficult family situations. I'll see you in the next video.